Welcome, Rebels, to another video where we talk tactically about Star Wars Destiny. I'm your host, Gray, and today I'm going to introduce and discuss a brand new topic that has been rolling around in my brain for a little while, and that's the psychology of Destiny. And let me begin by saying that I fully expect this to be an ongoing video series that I'm going to revisit from time to time as the game continues to take shape and be remolded by its developers with every updated rules reference, for example, or when a new set comes out, or perhaps major tournament outcomes. Now, there's no one way to define what the psychology of Destiny is per se. Instead, I'm going to be talking to you today about things related to the publishing, marketing, and even the player interaction with the product of this game. And that all might sound a bit dry for those just looking to seek a conversation about the game or learn something new, but I think it's important to begin this series with these topics so that we can segue into much larger and more game-related topics. Also, I wanted to do this topic to sort of get back into the swing of my usual content. We've had a lot of spoiler videos lately, and while those certainly pull in views on my channel and other channels, they're not really the aim of this channel. This sort of stuff is. So let's get back to our roots and give this one the old Padawan try. To me, the essence of Star Wars is understanding the nature of good versus evil. It's an age-old story of conflict and love, rooting for the underdog, and the exploration of deeply intrinsic human stuff. And these emotions are portrayed through the passions of characters. And as people, we naturally tend towards certain characters, identify with them in some way. Thus, everyone has a favorite Star Wars character and that can directly translate into our deck choices. Now, we might decide to choose the very basis of our deck on who we want to play without any thought of whether it can win or not. Alongside that, we often hear words like thematic in reference to single characters or even entire decks. And the game's designers have even given us some great thematic pairings to try out. And when those same game designers fall short of giving players what they want or expect, we often call to thematics as a justification for our dislike of that. So going back to deck choices for a moment, we often find in Destiny that our favorite characters aren't always the best characters to play. Words like casual get thrown around when we see people stick to what they like rather than what is good. Competitive players sometimes even look down on these people as if they don't understand what they're doing. Well, some of them perhaps, but many actually just don't care. And that's the crux of it. Star Wars is such a loved franchise that the judgment you pass over these players and their decks don't actually matter to those players. They're in it for fun, and competitive players would do well to understand and respect that, if for no other reason than that player is a human being. Now, for those players who are competitive, who simply want to win, they play the best characters, the tier 1 decks, because regardless of their feelings of Star Wars, if they have any, they're there for the prestige mainly. They want to take home the prize, get the fame, whatever. And I don't want to paint all competitive players in a single color or with the same stroke. Each have their own motivations for wanting to be at the top of the meta, whether that's their local, regional, or national level. And just as these players may never understand casuals, casuals will never try to understand them. But to further the point, casual players don't actually think about competitive players as much as competitive players think about casual players. And that's something to remember next time you're facing off a very casual player in round 1 of a kit tournament. The motivations are different on either side of the table in that case, and both are worthy and respectable. It's no secret that Fantasy Flight Games wants Star Wars Destiny to be profitable. And to do that, they want you to have this game in your mind all the time and to invest in it as much as you possibly can afford to. There was a time that me and many others were actually trying to give FFG our money to buy into this game, and the product just wasn't there. Now, it's clear that the distribution problems that they were having have been solved, or at least that's what it seems like. And there's a lot of product on the shelves now, and as it turns out, players are really happy when product is readily available for the game that they want to play. And a lot of this was building up to the new Rival set, wherein they will need product to be readily available if the alternate formats for this game are going to survive and if the product is going to be moving off the shelves to make room for new product. It was a very critical piece for them, and it's good for both us and them that they were able to find a solution. And what that solution has given FFG is agency over their own destiny, pun intended, in regards to the game. Now they can really drive home that this game is here to stay, Legacies is coming, and they can remind us of that on a fairly regular basis. So how do they do that? Well, they do that both through their website and through players, just like you and me. Although I guess I'm a bit different because I'm a content creator, and sometimes they give us spoilers. So I put together a little bit of a calendar for last month, which was October 2017, of all the times that they gave us some Star Wars Destiny related news. And here is that calendar. And I'm going to go through each date, okay? So the first date was Friday, October 6th, and that's when they gave us the Legacies reveal, okay? And then on the 16th, 10 days later, they told us about Rivals on their own website. Then on 10/24, we had the Rules Reference Guide update. 3 days later, we got the First Steps article, which was a review of the starters. And then on 10/30, the Jedi Trials got a couple of spoilers, which were released through Facebook and their own podcast. And then the day after, on the 31st, 3-Man Meta also got some spoilers, which were released through Facebook and their YouTube channel. So, you know, you could say that this is a very aggressive strategy. Could they be telling us more and more often? Certainly. I mean, they could always do that, right? They could litter their website with Star Wars Destiny related news every day. They could have given out 40 spoilers, you know, to all the content creators by now. And I don't really know how this compares to other CCGs, but I don't think that this strategy necessarily makes it any less aggressive, okay? What you can notice by the actual looking at the calendar is that the time between discussion of Star Wars Destiny has gotten shorter and shorter. So the first gap was 10 days, then it was 8 days, then it was 3 days, then 3 days again, and then 1 day. So they really rushed it as October was coming to an end. And what you should recall is that Empire at War dropped on September 14th here in the States. And they literally only waited till 10/6, which was 3 weeks later, to tell you that the new set was coming. So consider not just the frequency of the updates, which is about 1 to 2 per week in October on average, but also the weight or the importance of the news itself. Spoilers are a huge catch for people. These videos get the most views on my channel easily. In fact, the last Legacy Spoilers video I did was about 150 more views than the most viewed video on my channel. And I'm sure that it is no different for any of the other content creators. Maybe people are actually thirsty for new cards already. Perhaps they just like hearing about Destiny. I'm sure there's a lot of different factors for why. And also, I don't want you to get me wrong in going over this topic, okay? I want to know what's going on in my game too, and I like looking about and hearing about spoilers. All that stuff is really cool. I just want you to be aware of the tactics that they employ to keep you caring about their product so your interest doesn't wane too much. They want to be in your mind so that you don't forget, and marketing is a big way that they get that done. Okay, lastly, also, just looking at this calendar, you can probably bank on some more spoilers coming our way soon. And no, that is not a hint that I actually got any yet. So you're wondering, why did I even bother mentioning marketing, right? Every game does marketing, and what does it have to do with the topic of psychology? Well, we all buy cards for this game, but we go about it in various ways, and you might call those purchasing strategies. New players, and even some players that are getting back into the game, often ask on Facebook groups or even Reddit, what's the best way to go about investing in the game again? And that's not really a simple question to answer. There's actually a lot of factors at play here, right? So the first is a player's nature to be casual or competitive, which we talked about. Are they a collector? That can change things significantly. What's their level of disposable income? Do they want to play one faction or both? Are there certain characters they want to build around, or are they just willing to play whatever wins, right? Some of these questions are chicken and egg problems, like, how do I know what I want to play if I don't know about the game? Which characters are good and how much do they cost in actual dollars? Is that worth it for me? But in general, most people can distill it down into the avenues in which they pour money into the game. And that's usually divided into box purchases, pack purchases, and buying singles. Collectors, casual players, competitive players are all going to bring a different mode of thinking into the mix. Their own brand of psychology, as it were, and that's the explanation for how this all ties in. Now, I think of myself as sort of a middle ground player. A semi-hardcore player is what I call myself. And I dabble in collecting, and I generally focus on getting hero faction cards first. I play a healthy amount of Destiny, and I probably pour about $100 to $150 per month into the game between tournaments, packs, singles, things like that. So for me, I generally buy 2 boxes each expansion and then packs every other week or so, on top of the pack per win prize tournaments that I play every week. So to me, that allows me to be satisfied with building my collection over time in a somewhat economical manner. But I'm also not one of those players who exists on the extreme, right? I'm sort of somewhere in the middle, maybe even above average in terms of purchase. I don't know. But some players are extreme. They want the entire playset as soon as the set drops. They're going to buy 4 boxes, 5 boxes, a case, whatever. And they might try to sell off their extras, but more than likely they sit on them for a long while, because the reality is the chase is more fulfilling than actually completing the set. Because these people just really love opening packs, and they feel the full effect of what I call card cocaine. And that's a term that me and a friend came up with many, many years ago when we were playing Magic to describe why you feel the urge to continue opening packs. Basically, we came up with this silly idea that there's a thin layer of cocaine that gets puffed into the air when you open a pack. And as the nearest person to said pack, as you open it, you inhale that card cocaine, and it makes you want more card cocaine. So you buy more packs. And none of this is actually true. It's just kind of a funny CCG-ism sort of thing. But anyway, casual players are usually found consuming product at a steady rate, but they tend to purchase less because for them, the game isn't as important as everything else that they've got going on in their life. They usually don't have the best decks, and as a result, they might not win a lot of games. And, you know, because of that, they're actually at the highest risk for dropping out of the game as a result. So to keep them interested, you can usually find the previously mentioned hardcores or hardcore helpers at your store, giving them extra cards and whatnot, you know, and this lets that casual player build up their stuff at a cheaper cost and brings their interest level up in a lot of cases. So to all the store owners out there, those players are even more valuable to you than the other players who don't do that, that just buy a case of cards for you, because they're actually helping keep you in business in their own special little way. And I think it's very important to highlight this all for one reason, because I get a sense that a lot of players don't actually understand the motivations for why people might be a certain kind of player. Remember that a lot of factors go into it. And, you know, I mentioned some of those earlier, but there are also players that are in transition from casual to competitive, and even from competitive to quitting the game or moving on to a different game. And what this makes for is a wide variety of players, all existing within the game's ecosystem at different interest levels. And a healthy store scene needs that, believe it or not. And whether you actually believe that or not is, I guess, ultimately up to you. Destiny, as a Star Wars product and a CCG, attracts 2 very different crowds of people. The former, Star Wars product, probably exists more in the casual crowd area for the most part. And the latter, the CCG aspect of the game, probably has a mix with a lean towards competitive players, because that's ultimately who they're trying to appeal to in mass, because of, you know, and that's where they're doing things like the organized play announcements now and things like that. And as such, there is a need for the development team to leverage their efforts to appeal to both players relatively equally. And anyone hanging around the competitive scene lately can tell you that that has not been an easy task. In fact, the most recent rules reference update made 2 fundamental modifications to the way that the game is actually played, right? The replacement effects and the discard to reroll any amount of dice. And I think that illustrates that in a lot of ways, the game's rules are still very much in flux. And stuff like that is intended to enhance the fun for casuals while promoting a fairer game environment for the competitive scene. And also, it pushes a wider variety of decks into favor in exchange for disrupting what FFG knows is the minority of players and the minority of decks. And that is, the minority can be defined as those players who only play the best and most competitive decks, right? Yep. I hate to ring your bell, folks, but if you're one of those like elitist net decker people who just goes to try to win, you should know that you're actually in the minority. I know that's really sad, right? But I jest and I digress all at once. What we're really talking about here ultimately is game balance, and it's a very important in-game tool as well as a very important psychological tool. And I'll explain the latter here because I think that most people can understand why it's important for a game to be balanced in-game to widen its pool of playable cards and character combinations. For the players, we want to know that our investment is important, no matter what we like to play or what cards we pull from our packs. And of course, there's always going to be good cards and bad cards and everything in between. But it becomes important for us to know that we're getting our money's worth across the board, and the value of our cards are most directly impacted by meta shifts and game balance changes. For example, okay, when EAW was being spoiled and talked about, many people got the impression that the quad jumper was going to magically jump up in price. I'm not sure that it actually did much, if at all, but the point illustrates the effect that a new set and a perceived shift in balance can have on us, the market, and the game. Similarly, with the most recent rules reference update, people are now whispering that Vibro Knife might drop a bit in price. I actually saw a Facebook Marketplace post a couple of days ago where someone was selling off their Vibro Knives for $6 each, and there was 2 of them in that post. And I think that that person was actually quitting the game, and stuff was being sold at a pretty big discount. But looking over the price list, it seemed like the Vibro Knives specifically were far cheaper than most of the other stuff was in comparison to the usual prices that people sell things for. And of course, that's just one isolated case, so take that with a grain of salt. You know, several of the content creators have commented on the value of Vibro Knife as a card since the rules reference update dropped, but none have really discussed a change in the market value. And if I'm gonna be the first one to say something like that, then my opinion on this is gonna be that at best it's gonna make maybe like a 20% dip in price. Now, I think at this point, it's also worth mentioning how I feel about the rarity of cards in general, because that can be a very psychological thing as well. FFG probably doesn't care about the secondary market when it comes to cards because they don't make any money on it. So telling them that an ancient lightsaber is $40 on eBay and you're mad about it isn't really going to get their attention, okay? That price that you're talking about is set by the supply and demand, which is based on the rarity and the utility of the card itself. And both are factors that are considered for game balance purposes. And yet, some cards also have a fixed rarity. For example, cards that come from standalone sets, such as the starter boxes or the 2-player game or the new rival set, are all going to have a fixed rarity, right? And what's really interesting about these boxes are they tend to have cards in them that you could say that if these were part of a normal set of cards, then these would be a common or an uncommon, or these would be rares, and these would probably be considered legendaries. You know, for example, Honor Guard is probably a common, a very good common, but you could probably see it as an uncommon as well. However, stuff like Captain Phasma's Blaster and Ray's Lightsaber definitely have this legendary feel to them because of their cost for the die and their power level. You know, if you can kind of understand how that makes some sense in comparison to other cards. Similarly, stuff like Mind Probe and Force Throw were most likely the legendaries slots in the original starters. And looking at the 2 new spoiled starters, the Luke's box gets the Millennium Falcon, which is probably the legendary card, and Boba's box gets a Slave 1. But honestly, I think that the wrist rockets are actually the true legendary in that box, and you're going to hear Rick and crew talk about that on the next Knights of Ren podcast that we just recorded, and I was a guest on. And this matters because when you make cards have a fixed rarity as opposed to a mixed rarity from booster boxes, you draw players into this mental conundrum where they really want 2 copies of those cards, and the casual players, maybe they don't want to spend more money to get another copy of that one card that they really want. If they're a go-getter, they might just wait for someone to break up a box and trade it, or they might buy it through some place like Miniature Market or Cool Stuff Inc. or whatever. And the competitive players, however, we're all suckers, and we fall for it every single time because we know that 2 ofs are the standards for really good cards. So if there's really good cards in these boxes, which there inevitably are, we're going to want that. And, you know, a 2 of, that's an inherent thing to the game. So this ends up promoting both their marketing strategy while conveniently taking advantage of player psychology in regards to deck construction. You might even say that it's insidious in a way. On the other hand, you might feel it's really just a good way to keep their business going. So let me begin to wrap up this video by saying congratulations for making it this far, assuming you watched every single second to this point and you didn't cheat your way here. I had mentioned on Facebook earlier in the week that this topic was going to need a big introduction, so this is definitely just the first of at least 2 videos in this series. And the next one is going to focus less on external factors and more on game time at the table decisions that Destiny presents to us by way of its game design. And I think that that video might actually appeal to people a little bit more than this one by way of actually addressing some stuff that you might see in live games or that you've already experienced. And I'm debating on the presentation for it right now, as I want to be able to illustrate the emphasis on the decision-making process, but I figure I have a few more days to figure that one out. The script is coming together really nicely. It's almost done. And the most important thing is that I follow up this video, that the follow-up to this video comes out soon so that the overall theme makes sense. And you're probably thinking, well, Gray, maybe you're complicating things too much. That's probably true. And yet I also want to deliver you high-quality content that no one else is talking about in this format or in this exact same way. You know, originality to me is the key to this game in content creation, and I feel that that's a standard that I'd set for myself early, and I want to make sure that I continue to deliver that, even if I get far less fans or subs than everyone else out there. In any case, I'm glad you stopped by to give this one a listen. I'm not even sure how I'm going to categorize this one, honestly. You know, perhaps I'll leave that to you and I'll just shove it into an existing playlist of some kind. But I do hope that you took something away from this in any case, and that I got you to think about all the things that you are experiencing without really actively realizing that you're experiencing them. And if you've gotten to that point, I feel like I've done my job with this video. So until next time, Rebels, speak softly, drive a big tank, and fight the darkness within. May the Force be with you.